Shalom and welcome to Neshama Cast, exploring Jewish spiritual care today, brought to you by Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains. I'm your host, Rabbi Ed Bernstein. Please note that this program contains references to suicide, so do take care while listening. This program originally aired on the Seekers of Meaning podcast, produced by Jewish Sacred Aging. I want to thank the podcast producer and director of Jewish Sacred Aging, Rabbi Richard Address, for granting permission to Neshama Cast to rebroadcast this episode on our feed. Rabbi Address is a member of NAJC, and we always welcome opportunities for collaboration between NAJC and Jewish Sacred Aging. In this program, Rabbi Address is joined in conversation by Chaplain Barry Pittigoff, my colleague on the board of Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains, and Missy Stolfi from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They join Rabbi Address to discuss their upcoming virtual webinar, Through a Jewish Lens, for survivors of suicide victims. The webinar takes place Sunday, November 24th from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll now send it over to Rabbi Richard Address and the Seekers of Meaning podcast.
Shalom and welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us in what we hope to be a very, very powerful and interesting conversation today. If you would like to connect with us and make suggestions or comments on programs or ideas for future podcasts, please feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Check out the website, jewishsacredaging.com, and the Jewish Sacred Aging Facebook page. We'd be very appreciative of your involvement and look forward to hearing from you. One of the issues that has come up off and on several of these podcasts and continues to be a concern within the American Jewish community and in truth outside the Jewish community as well, is the subject of today's podcast, and has to do with issues around those people who are survivors of suicide. And we are very, very pleased and honored to welcome two very, very special guests to talk about a very powerful program that is about to be launched. So we welcome Barry Pittigoff, a chaplain and one of the active board members of Neshama, the Association of Jewish Chaplains, and Missy Stolt, who is the Capital Region New York Chapter Director for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I think I got all of that right. Tough to get on a back of the T-shirt. So Barry and Missy, thank you very, very much for joining us. We want to talk a little bit at the beginning to set the stage about the current statistics, if that's possible, about the issue of suicide, and then really focus on bringing people up to date and inviting them to participate in a very, very powerful program being set for this Sunday, the 24th of November, entitled Through a Jewish Lens, Hope and Healing for Suicide Loss Survivors. We're going to talk about how to get involved with that. It's a Zoom program, and from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you can do the math about where you live across North America. So first of all, Barry, Missy, thank you very, very much for joining us. Let's sort of like get the groundwork stage. First of all, do you have a sense of the statistics about suicide in the Jewish community now?
So thank you so much, Rabbi Address, for the opportunity to talk and to spend some time today with your viewers as well. When it comes to data and statistics around suicide, the data that we utilize most of all when we speak nationally is through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So the CDC is really who helped drive so much of that. It's collected across states and municipalities across the country, and generally it's about 2 years behind. So pretty much the numbers we are looking at as far as comprehensive analyzed data is 2022 statistic. And unfortunately, when it comes to data collection, Faith group is not an area, a demographic that is captured when it comes to suicide death rates, across the country. So we don't have accurate statistics there, but we can gain some insights from those who have lost somebody to suicide, or people who have struggled with suicidal thoughts or behaviors, or things like that too. So the key is that no group is immune from the risk of suicide. There are certain groups who have maybe higher risk factors, or also stronger protective factors as well that can help reduce risk. So we don't have any kind of real clear, indication when it comes to Jewish faith specifically.
I put on my other cap also, which is demographer and statistician for my first career. The hospitals use a uniform federal form for death certificate, which does not include religion. It does include suicide as an option for death. And of course, by listening to the clergy we're involved with over time and the victims of suicide loss, there's always this hesitance still about religion, because some of the religions still make you the Baba Meiser, that it's a sin, you're going to have big problems with it. And we have untrained clergy in synagogue, people who don't know about how to use a cemetery and what spaces to use. So there's still this blot over it.
You have a sense, though, Missy, Barry, that my understanding and even my own experience from my rabbinate is this remains a multi-generational challenge. This is not limited to one demographic community, and the multi-generational for a whole variety of reasons.
Yeah, so when you look at just at what's called statistic, what you call the rate per 100,000, the upper ages is now the fastest growing a group on the rate per 1,000.
And why is that?
So in terms of older adults, a number of the contributing factors when it comes to suicide risk, first of all, a lot of life transitions. Older adults are experiencing a lot of loss in their lives, whether it is loss of people who are important to them, loss of identity when they're retiring, if their career was very central to their lives, loss of autonomy. Health is often declining as well physically. And, there's a lot of isolation that our older adults face as well. And so when you couple that with oftentimes older adults have access to lethal means or methods for suicide, and their bodies are already maybe a little bit, deteriorating as well. So they're less likely to survive a suicide attempt. And so having that sense of connection and purpose really can be a huge protective factor for our older adults. And oftentimes we forget about them, so we don't think of it as big of a tragedy. But we know that our older adults still have so much more, to give. They still have so much value. So we want to make sure is that we are paying attention to this particular group of folks in our communities when it comes to suicide risk.
Yeah, Barry, we were talking before. You were speculating on the impact of loneliness, isolation as a contributing factor, and how much do you think the pandemic really pushed this, really, and exacerbated it?
Significantly. I think the pandemic helped a lot, sadly, to increase it. But we also have this issue of loneliness. And when I was looking at the academic studies on suicide, I came across this interesting phrase called "marriage is a protector of suicide," which married people are less likely to die by suicide, and so divorced men become a higher cohort for suicide. So marriage is a protector, and the older we are, of course, the more likely you are to be by yourself for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, the statistics now and the research about relationships and the power of relationships and socialization as you get older as a guarantee of life enhancement, you really can't argue that anymore. I mean, it's just, as you guys were alluding to, that if I'm in a society, if I'm with people, that's the counteraction to, isolation and loneliness. This one, before we get to the program, I also want to ask you, because you just triggered this in my own mind, that is there a growth? I'm concerned about the pastoral counseling aspect of this. How are we reaching people who may be contemplating ending their own life? How do we intervene? How can we get them help spiritually, emotionally, therapeutically? Are we still behind the curve on that as a society? It would seem to me that the answer to that is unequivocally yes.
I would say from our perspective, absolutely we need an increase in training for those who are faith leaders, whether that is clergy, whether it is lay leaders in, congregations as well. We have some work to undo when it comes to faith communities. They can absolutely be a source of support. But if we have the right language and understanding, there's still a lot of myth education and misinformation that has perpetuated in faith communities. And so being able to unlearn some of that and to teach our faith leaders how to talk to and listen to and the signs to keep an eye and ear out for that someone may be experiencing suicidal desperation. And then how to have that caring conversation with them. So including if somebody in a congregation has lost someone to suicide, we tend to be pretty good about wrapping our arms around those who have lost a loved one to cancer or to a heart attack, right? But unfortunately, when we learn someone has lost their loved one to suicide because we don't know what to say, the default is we say nothing, which increases that sense of isolation, guilt, shame, all of that can be tied up in this particular type of grief. So there's absolutely opportunity for us to better equip faith leaders in this way.
And the first outreach is now, Missy could tell you about this new federal 988 program, which is not faith-based. It's a national outreach. And then from there, you could be directed to faith resources. But the first, we're trying to publicize this 988. Richie, Missy can tell you more about that.
So Missy, what is this program?
Sure. So this is just 2 years old now. But we always want to use the opportunity to make sure community members know about 988, which is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And it went into effect July 2022. Previously, you would have to call a 1-800 number that was a little long and difficult to remember. And really, 988 is created as a alternative to 911, but serves in a similar concept for mental health emergencies. Or even if you're not sure it quite amounts to emergency, but you're concerned for someone in your life or for yourself. So it could be either way. And it can be accessed 24/7 across the country, either by phone, text, or chat online. And it's a whole network of call centers and wraparound care, including mobile crisis, follow-up services as well, depending on what's going on with that individual. And there's trained crisis counselors who are able to ascertain what's going on in that moment. What does the appropriate response need to be? And so I think that's something as just even a baseline for everybody to understand and know is a resource for them, no matter where they are across the United States, that they are able to access that to help themselves or to help someone else that they're concerned about.
So let me get this straight. I feel the need. I pick up the phone, I dial, punch, or connect with 988, dial 988. And who is going to answer that phone? Who's on the other end?
It's a trained crisis counselor.
Okay. And trained so that if I say I'm feeling very lonely, I'm feeling very depressed, I'm contemplating ending my life, this individual has the training and the knowledge to be able to either speak to me in a certain way, provide me with resources, depending upon where I live. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in that?
Correct. You're absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay. So, and just to close this a little bit, Barry, Neshama, the Association of Jewish Chaplains, is there training for chaplains, specific training to enhance experience dealing with suicide and survivors?
Well, we have more chaplains who are experienced with bereavement support groups for suicide loss survivors. We have chaplains training other chaplains, particularly our Rabbi Chaplain Suzanne Offit up in Massachusetts. She does a suicide loss support group on Zoom every other week, and she does an annual Yizkor service for suicide loss survivors, and she has helped us with training. And we have found in some of the breakout sessions of the Through a Jewish Lens in the last few years, this affinity for the chaplains we provide them with, rather than some of the synagogue-affiliated people who may have other associations with them that bad experience. People said the wrong thing at the wrong time, which is, I don't know if we can use the cemetery. I don't know how we're going to handle this. And, as our wonderful mentor, Rabbi Garfein, taught us, we're not here to make the world worse, harder for people. Do not place a stumbling block before the blind. But a lot of our survivors have found stumbling blocks towards the pathway for a respectable Jewish funeral. So they turn to us during the meetings for chaplains because we're not part of a synagogue they know of and they trust us. It's nice.
So on Sunday, the 24th, this program called Through a Jewish Lens, Hope and Healing for Suicide Loss Survivors. Okay, so let's walk through this, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. This is Sunday, the 24th. It's on Zoom. I want to participate. This is something I need. How do I register for this?
Absolutely. So you can visit afsp.org and to find any Survivor Day event in your community, including Through a Jewish Lens. And and then we do send the, login information to all of our registrants leading up to the program. And this is one of many Survivor Day events. We call it for short, but the full name of the program is International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. And just to give a little history and context to where Through a Jewish Lens fits in, International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day was created as an act of Congress in 1999. It was actually then Senator Harry Reid from Nevada, who himself lost his father to suicide. So an act of Congress designated that the first Saturday before American Thanksgiving would be a day designated towards suicide loss survivors specifically, and acknowledging and supporting their particular grief journey and their healing journey. And so AFSP hosts in-person and virtual programs around the country. Most are on Saturday before Thanksgiving, but oftentimes you will see a few that are taking place around that time frame. And a couple years ago, my predecessor in this chapter saw a need, an opportunity for those especially who are observant Jewish faith to hold an opportunity, hold space outside of a Saturday, but also to create an opportunity for folks to connect in particular with that Jewish perspective. So not just holding a cookie cutter version on a Sunday, but really to create it from the ground up through that Jewish lens, literally, where the title comes from. And so I'm going to hand to Barry actually to talk a little bit more since he's been tied to this since we started this about 4 years ago, this particular program.
Yeah, and I just I was going to say I just looked into it, but Hashem pointed me towards it. I found it on the internet. I offered to help in 21 and 22, and then in 23 I sent an email to that predecessor from Missy. It came back saying she was no longer with the organization. I'm sitting in my hospital office where on the wall in front of me is a tractate from the Talmud that says you may not finish the work, but you can't desist from it. I said, all right, I guess I got to run it. So I put back my MBA and BBA qualities plus my chaplaincy, and we pulled it all together. And gradually the program has evolved. It's different now than it was a few years ago because we don't have a film we are required to show from the headquarters. It can be much more Jewish in the content. And we have some commitments for some major speakers to give us tapes this year. We're waiting for one or two. Congressman Jamie Raskin was very interested. His son, Tommy, died by suicide at age 25 while Congressman Raskin was doing all the hearings in Congress. Hazan Michael Zussman, who's a good colleague from NAJC, moved all the way to Vancouver, but he will open and close with a cantorial selection. The first one is based on Rabbi Nachman's The Life is a Narrow Bridge, and the secret is not to be afraid. And he will close with Heal Us Now by Hazan Sher. And in between, we will have actually this year some of our planning committee members talking about their journey, which includes Rabbi Dan Roberts, whom I met through you. And then we will have always a breakout session of 20 to 30 minutes. I have 6 NAJC BCCs, 5 others plus me, to moderate the breakout session just so these people can talk to each other. And most of them have not seen each other before because they're scattered around the country. And it gives them a chance to discuss and talk. We will probably have 1 or 2 guided discussions, depending on the moderator. The one I'm always concerned about each year is, why are you still signing up for Jewish programs? You have so many reasons to give up any faith, and yet this resonates to you. Are you still with your synagogue? Are you still with a federation? Where do you identify? How is that different? And of course, where has Judaism been for you in this very unique grief journey?
So this, I'm surprised you could do all this in 2 hours, to tell you the truth. So is there an age breakout? In other words, I'm a 12-year-old kid and my father or mother, God forbid this happened. Is there an age limit, or have to be over 18 to participate in this?
That's a great question, actually. We don't screen for that necessarily. However, it tends to be adults who do sign up. These events are really intended more for an adult audience. We do have, AFSP does provide resources around children and teens and suicide loss, including, while we don't host or facilitate our own suicide loss survivor support groups, we do offer training for those who wish to facilitate those, including for those who wish to facilitate a more youth-based survivor support group. So we do have a number of resources. While Survivor Day itself is not exactly designed for that for younger people, but recognizing that young people and the way they experience loss be, definitely a much different perspective with where they are developmentally.
And the demographics we collect on the registration form, of course, this is a free event, includes for whom are they grieving and what was the relationship? What is the relationship? And we do see a variety of children and parents.
Right. So this is 2 hours on Sunday, with breakouts, testimonials. When this is finished, you'll have, this whole cadre of people from around the country, probably North America. What happens after the event?
It's interesting because sometimes at these events, when we do these virtually, is folks may wish to, be in touch with each other afterwards if they found they connected with somebody in a breakout room. If you're having a similar conversation in person, right, it's easy to exchange phone numbers with each other if you'd like to stay in touch. In order to respect privacy, however, too, we really assure that we would separately connect with those folks and say, do you both wish to share email or phone number? We don't want to put anyone in a position that they're being contacted offline. We don't record the program for that reason, too. We do not allow media, for example, in-person or virtual events, in order to really create that space folks can really open up about their stories. But we will send some follow-up, communications and resources just to encourage the participants stay connected, whether it is with their local AFSP chapter, or, in the case of, other faith communities, but just to make sure that they are taking care of themselves, especially as we enter, a season that can be pretty challenging. Many holidays are happening. There's a lot of festivities that happen towards the end of the calendar year, looking ahead to, a new year. And it can be tough for everybody. The mixed bag, there's supposed to be a lot of joy and festivity, but not everyone feels that. And it can feel like a lot of pressure. And so that's intentional why Survivor Day happens just before Thanksgiving, because these times of year can be really challenging if you have lost somebody to suicide and they're no longer part of all of the merriment that's happening.
And throughout the program, we feature Missy's official email address from the Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And in the follow-up, they're welcome to get back to her and say they'd like to reach me or another speaker, and then we can connect them to more resources.
Okay. And I think it's important for people, Missy mentioned this, that the program is not being recorded. So, and I think people need to understand that out of respect, obviously, for privacy. Before we have to conclude, is there still a lot of shame and guilt associated with this conversation?
Absolutely. We've come a long way and we have a long way to go. And so, absolutely the work remains. We can look back to, even a few years ago, 10 years ago, we weren't having these types of conversations on a podcast, right? And we weren't having these kind of conversations, out in public in the same way. There wasn't that same visibility. for this topic. But there is still generations of, perceptions and teachings and misinformation and myths that certainly still persist. And, culturally, in terms of mental health, we are where we need to be as far as recognizing, taking care of it at that same level of importance as our physical health. So from a prevention standpoint as well, we're still making strides there. I think that we are looking now at suicide as a public health issue. And so, shifting some of that perspective and recognizing that it has a wide reach and that there are so many groups that are impacted. But there's things that many of us can do, even if we don't have special clinician training or certain letters after our names. There's much that we all can do to be there for each other, including to support someone who lost someone to suicide, to what we call postvention. So we still have definitely work to do, which is why programs like this are still so essential. And it means so much to have support, Rabbi Address, to, get the word out there, to make sure people know they're not alone if this resonates with them.
We have 3 co-sponsors for the program, NAJC, Association of Jewish Chaplains, and one of the other co-sponsors is actually an organization out of Chicago called No Shame on You, because they deal with that aspect of dealing with shame with situations like this. It's also interesting to note, I saw this through my research, that not only counseling and speaking to each other, but you can use architecture to reduce this. When the Golden Gate Bridge was built, it had a railing to protect the workers. When they opened it, they took away the railing, and they had suicide by jumping many, many years. They just restored a full rail on both sides of the bridge. And shopping centers are learning, those open atrium shopping centers, to put the walls a little bit higher to discourage jumping, because there's been some of that also. So you can also use architecture to offset the temptation.
Wow. Thank you. Before we end, again, somebody may be listening to this today before Sunday. They want to register. They may not have heard about it. How do they do that?
Sure. So visit afsp.org and search Through a Jewish Lens.
And even, I noticed even in the search bar, if you just put in Jewish for Boss Day events, it'll come up.
And is there a deadline time-wise but to register? In other words, if I listen to this or watch this at 9 a.m. Sunday morning, will that be too late?
No, we'll be monitoring our registration link up to the start of the program at 12 p.m. Eastern on Sunday the 24th. So even if you listen to this an hour before, you can reach out. My contact information will be listed on the event site as well. So we could certainly send you the link and credentials to get logged in with us. So we definitely want to keep it open.
Last question.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose somebody, and there will be people who will watch or listen to this, but after Sunday, and they'll say, I didn't know about this, but I really would like to connect with this organization. How does somebody do that?
Absolutely. And that's where, again, afsp.org is such a good resource. It shows all the breadth and depth of the work that we do across the country, and you can search for your local chapter. So wherever, if you are in the United States watching, this right now, wherever you are in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, we have chapters. And so you can search by what's closest to you and get the contact information for your local chapter. And it lists all the various programs, resources, ways to get involved and to get support. So by all means, the door is not closed to get connected with us, even if you're listening after
If you're specifically looking for the Jewish support, they probably can still find the link that gets back to you in this program.
Absolutely.
Chaplain Barry Pittigoff and Missy Stolfi, thank you very, very much. This is a lot of information. Good luck on Sunday. Love to know how it goes, and keep in touch with us so we can help. 988 is the contact information hotline number, 988. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you again for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. If you'd like to contact us again, just email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. The website, and on the website, Jewish Sacred Aging, a conveniently located donate button. And if you can help us and support our work, we really, really are appreciative of it. Take care. A reminder and a thank you to our producer, Steve Lubetkin, and a reminder that These programs are recorded through the courtesy and at the Broadcast Center of Lebec and Media in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. To all of you, thank you very, very much for listening, watching. It's a very, very important topic. 988, remember it. Until we see each other again, stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy and be kind to one another. Shalom.
NeshamaCast is a production of Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains. Thank you to Rabbi Richard Address and his team at Jewish Sacred Aging for allowing NeshamaCast to rebroadcast this episode of Seekers of Meaning. Subscribe to Seekers of Meaning on major podcast outlets and YouTube. And, of course, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to NeshamaCast on major podcast outlets as well. Thanks to Chaplain Barry Pitagoff and Missy Stolfi for sharing their insights, and to Chaplain Barry in particular for cultivating this collaboration between NAJC and Jewish Sacred Aging. Check the show notes for more information about topics discussed in the program, including a link to join the webinar Through a Jewish Lens for survivors of suicide victims. The webinar takes place Sunday, November 24th from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please consider making a contribution to NAJC to support NeshamaCast and all of the vital work that NAJC does to promote Jewish spiritual care. Click on the link in the show notes to donate. Thank you to Allison Atterbury, NAJC Executive Director, and Rabbi Drew Kaplan and the NAJC Social Media Committee for their logistical support. Our theme music is a nigun for Ki'anu Amecha, written and performed by Reb Cantor Lisa Levine. Please help others find the show by rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. We welcome comments and suggestions for future programming at neshamacast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow NAJC on Facebook to learn more about Jewish spiritual care happening in our communities. May we all work together to heal our world.